Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
Two Doomed Men podcast, the greatest, ready? The greatest podcast in the history of the country, perhaps even the world by far. I don't think anyone comes close.
In all the world.
You heard it here. All right, Doom Nation, welcome back. You're listening to the Two Doom Men podcast. My backdrop is going crazy and I'm all digital. But anyway, we are back with another episode. As always, it's the Two Doom, as Jesus Christ. As always, it's Scagz and yours truly, the Captain. What's going on, buddy? 2 sips
Fucked
of tequila
up
and I'm already,
Yeah.
Yep. Cheers.
Captain and I normally don't stream on Fridays unless we're in person with the crew, which we haven't done in a minute. So cheers to that. We will be in the months coming. We'll be getting back together with the boys for Halloween and stuff like that. Next week, don't forget, Tuesday is the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. We will be live streaming and playing the entire debate ourselves. So if you want to watch the debate, come to Two Doomed Men podcast on all of our channels. You could watch the debate. We'll be in the background. We'll do some commentary. There's going to be 2 commercial breaks I saw during this debate. That'll give us a couple minutes to chime in and say a couple things without interrupting too often during the actual debate itself, so everybody could watch. So it should be fun. Don't forget to come back to that. We're here this week. This is another one of those weeks, Cap, where I feel like nothing happened, but at the same time, a lot happened.
You know, I was listening to Tim Pool because he popped in the news, and we'll talk about that later. And they had mentioned, too, that things have been real slow in, like, the media and stuff. And it's strange because there are 2 presidential candidates, basically incumbents, you know, because she didn't really run the first time around, but and the media is just like not like covering it. You know, like she's doing so bad, Trump's doing so good that they can't show it, like to the point where like news is slowing down. There was a school shooting, but a good guy stopped a bad guy with the gun, so we can't cover that, you know.
Yeah,
but it's strange.
Bit the week about that at the end. It is kind of strange feeling. Last, I'd say 3 weeks. I'd put it at this point. It feels strange the past 3 weeks.
You think maybe they just like with the assassination and the coup, they were just like, all right, boys, look, we overdid it. We got to dial it back for.
Maybe they're on vacation before they really ramp things up before the election itself.
Yeah, before the Black Swan event.
Yeah, but tonight we got a couple really interesting things right in my wheelhouse. Me and the Captain, we have talked about World War II quite often on
extensively
on our show. I remember way back when we first started, we did a World War II in color before we even had video, audio only. We did a World War II in color podcast, and we talked about that show on Netflix. We did a debate about Truman, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. with some of our friends here, and our friend's dad was really interesting.
You should send the podcast we listen to. You sent it to Vin?
Of course I did.
You sent it to Vin?
Good. Sent it to Jimmy, and Jimmy sent it to Vinny. So
I sent it to Anthony.
There you go.
Yeah.
So tonight I thought we could watch a little bit of and talk about Darryl Cooper and Tucker Carlson's recent podcast where they talked about World War II and the history around it. It got very controversial online. I don't think this spread to the real world outside of online. But,
definitely did not.
There's a lot of interesting, as I always say, the reaction to things is sometimes more interesting than the thing itself, although this is debatable in this regard. The fact that perhaps the official narrative around World War II is not what you were taught in school is interesting. But then I'd like to focus kind of on tonight the psychological aspect of what Darryl Cooper and Tucker Carlson are talking about regarding like the state religion and like the foundational myths of the society that we live on. I thought that was really interesting. Yeah. So we'll play a little bit of that.
And me being a conspiracy theorist, I've always had my 1,000,001 questions about World War II. War is a big business. A world war is an even bigger business. And somebody had a benefit from all that. Yeah.
So just disclaimer to YouTube, we're not saying Hitler's a good guy or anything like that. We are just going to be talking about history tonight. Second main topic will be the Department of Justice putting out an indictment around Russia allegedly funding an American media company, which everyone believes to be Tenet Media, which is founded by Lauren Chen. I don't know if you know who Lauren Chen is, Cap. I followed her for a little bit. She's kind of like just a conservative podcast commentator, influencer type person. And a big story because it touches Tim Pool's show, Benny Johnson and Dave Rubin, all like big time conservative commentators in the space who make a difference to some extent. We'll get into that a little bit later, but it's interesting to see what's happening in, the podcast world itself is now, making the news cycle in of itself with Russia and
with Russian disinformation
and the regime. So we'll get to that later. Any other thoughts before we dive into Martyr Made?
No, I can't wait to see you go off the rails about World War II. You have been excited about this for the past 3-4 days now. Yeah.
I mean, there are lessons to be had here, right? That's the reason why we learn history in school. You're supposed to learn lessons from history. And I just think it's interesting how when someone comes along and says something different from what you've learned in government school, there are certain people who think it's interesting, think it's honest, think it's innocent, right? Like there's nothing wrong with having a good old-fashioned debate about World War II, right, Cap? We did.
Oh, you are threatening democracy, my friend.
But apparently you are. The West is under threat because we're daring to challenge some narrative from a war 70 years ago. So I thought that was interesting in of itself, like we were saying before. I think before we get to the psychological aspect of it, I just, for those who don't know what I'm talking about or didn't see it, I thought I'd play the first couple minutes of what was so controversial about what Darryl Cooper and Tucker Carlson were talking about, which is World War II. If anybody doesn't know Darryl Cooper, I've referenced him a couple times on the show. He did a great podcast about Israel-Palestine in the very beginning called Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem. His podcast is called Martyr Made. Go check it out. It is very interesting. I watched 28 hours of that on the first time about Israel and Palestine. And so I was excited when I saw that he was going to be doing Tucker. I'm like, wow, this is great. One of the guys who knows a lot about this stuff and isn't afraid to kind of tell it as it is or not kind of toe the, the orthodox narrative around any story and look at it very fairly from all sides.
Right.
So we'll start off real quick with the most controversial thing he said. I'm actually grabbing this from someone who was arguing with me on Twitter about it and posted on here. Here's the clip everyone's been talking about. If clipped improperly, he could say, "You took me out of context." So here it is to the end. It's exactly as everyone bad says. Now, just remember that as we watch this clip. He's using this as evidence of how bad what Darryl Cooper said.
I got in trouble with my podcast partner, Jocko Willink, one time because he's a New England Dutchman whose his family, it's near and dear to they're Dutch, but very near and dear to their heart that Winston Churchill is a hero, right?
Well, everyone
thinks that. He really thinks that. And I told him that I think maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe. But I told him, maybe trying to provoke him a little bit, that I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. He didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. But I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland. Or just, at every step of the way, like, people are very often, I find, surprised to learn. There's a two-step process.
Well,
right?
why don't you just make the case for that? Okay, so you've made your statement. A lot of people are thinking, well, wait a second. You just said Churchill, my childhood hero, the guy with the cigar.
Yeah. Well, and the next thought that comes into their head is that, oh, you're saying Churchill was the chief villain, therefore his enemies, Adolf Hitler and so forth, were
The good guy.
Stalin.
the protagonist, right?
Can you pause it for a second?
No, and that's not
Just for a quick comment. This line of thinking really is a cancer to American culture because it destroys all debates. It destroys any line of communication. I hate Trump. Well, why do you hate him? Oh, well, because he's a racist and he's a womanizer. Not really. He didn't really have that much of a racist. Well, I don't want to hear about it. If you like Trump, then I can't talk to you because you must be a racist. If you think Churchill's this way, then you must think Hitler is this way. No, this is a cancer to society that is destroying conversations.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if that's intentional to some extent, and why and by who.
Yeah,
right? Which we might perhaps we'll get into a little bit later. Let's keep going here for a second,
Yep.
and then we'll get.
Sorry, I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. Oh, hang on, what's going on here? Here we go.
Germany. Look,
Did you speed it up or?
into a
You start talking at the end, so I'll back up a couple
Sorry.
seconds.
they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it. That when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You have
Okay, so you hear the word camps, you hear Adolf Hitler, you hear World War II, and your first thought, of course, is going to be the Holocaust, right? But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the war itself, Hitler and the Wehrmacht moving into the East, beating the Soviet Union's ass in the very beginning, taking way more ground than they thought they would originally. And then you have all those prisoners and whatnot to care for. They weren't prepared, and a lot of them died, and it was fucking awful and whatnot. But that's been spun throughout the entire internet as him dismissing or kind of like retconning the Holocaust.
Yeah.
When that's not what he was talking about at all. And if you go back to the very beginning, he does say that he's being a little bit hyperbolic about Churchill. He's talking to Jocko Willink, his friend. He's trying to antagonize Jocko Willink a little bit about it. I just don't personally. Now, I don't personally see why it's a big issue to have this conversation. If you actually listen to what he was saying here, it's just a good collegiate debate or disagreement on character throughout history. It's not justifying one. And I'm coming from the point of view, Cap, you know me, it's a weird way to say it, but I love World War II. I love watching all the old documentaries and the movies, Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, and I loved that idea of we were the good guys and they were the bad guys, and we went over there and we whooped their ass, and everything we did was right and everything they did was wrong. And I kind of now hate that I know a little bit deeper beyond the surface of it, and it's not history, and the real world are never.
You don't look behind the curtain, pal.
It's never as black and white as it made out to be. Now, again, I have to say this, just like Darryl Cooper did. I'm not saying that Hitler and the Nazis were good guys, right? It's context, and it leads into the modern day a couple of issues, which we'll get into a little bit later. But now you're chomping at the bit, so go ahead.
What I was going to say, what makes it interesting for me is that there is a whole nother side to study. It's not, as you say, black and white and cut and dry, as Hitler bad, take Jews, throw them in camps, start the Holocaust. The Holocaust was like the final solution, as they put it. They didn't want to start the war off with the intention of doing this. You know what I mean? Like, and it's taboo and, against the law to even, bring up and talk about like, well, Hitler went down like other paths before he, ended up at the gas chambers, which I find super interesting, and it just a creative, different way to start researching and looking into what happened.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're not here to make Hitler's image. He was trying to get rid of the Jews one way or another, and the first easiest way he thought of was to just move them out, just to get them out of Germany and send them elsewhere. Ironically enough,
And
I know I've told
34 out of like 35 countries denied them
including
access,
the United States. He even had talks with the Stern Gang in Palestine. The Stern Gang is one of the three gangs that end up becoming the Israeli Defense Forces and the government of Israel after 1948, about sending them there. Right. He was in discussions with them, and then it just kind of fell apart and didn't go anywhere. And then the war started. But the general prevailing thought being that there were off ramps to the war. And when the war started, it put pressure on Hitler to accelerate his final solution and then just start industrial killing people, which was all insane and wrong and genocidal. The guy is an absolute monster. But if you want to look at it with the critical eye, perhaps there were off ramps before that where we could have actually prevented that from happening. Maybe there were a couple things that could have
prevented those off ramps.
Right. And I don't want to get too much into the X's and O's, like I was telling you about the history of this, because I like history, but I'm not a historian. I suggest you go and listen to that aspect from Darryl Cooper himself. I wanted to kind of talk about the psychological aspect of this, just around talking about it and how taboo it is.
Yeah.
Now, you ever watch something, Cap, and while you're watching it, you just feel like, wow, this is some profound shit that I'm hearing right now. I ain't never thought of something like this before, and it's really resonating.
It's a new way of thinking. New perspective.
That was what was happening to me when I was watching this part of the podcast, where they're talking about the state religion and the taboos. Now, this is a bit long, but I want everybody to see this who watches our show, just because I think it's important context for the forward years of Two Doomed Men. This is going to be something that I always remember, because I thought it was very profound, at least to me. So we'll play this. We'll comment a little bit more on it later.
Anytime you have a historical event, for us in the United States, it's the Civil Rights Movement, it's World War II, and to a certain degree, it's still the Civil War. Everything in between and before those things, you can do whatever you want. Doesn't matter. You think that the Russians were to blame for World War I and not the Germans. You think it was all British conspiracy. You can do whatever you want. It's fine, because that's not part of the founding mythology of the order that we're all living in at this time, right? And those other things are. Whenever you have a historical event that is mythologized, and when I say that, I don't mean myth like that's a myth, that's a lie. That's not what I mean. I mean that it's a formative part of how we all understand the world we're in, or at least officially, like the official world, like
the structures we
live in. It's the justification for a lot of those structures, right? Whenever you have those things, you're going to have taboos. You're going to have certain ways that certain topics have to be talked about that are going to guarantee that topic is just profoundly misunderstood. And I told the students at the University of Vienna, I said, over the next couple decades, like, we're going to get to a point where the interwar period and the Second World War are far enough away that people can actually start taking a more honest look at everything that went on. And it is going to be the most fruitful place that any aspiring historian can dive into, because we've spent the last 70 years, I mean, in Europe's case, like literally throwing people in jail for looking into the wrong corners, right? So there's and even
particularly in Austria.
Right. And so even in the United States.
Which was an invaded country, so I'm not exactly sure why it's so important.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's a big topic, but I mean, even the United States where you're not going to go to jail.
I'll comment on that real quick, Cap. I know I was telling you the other day that if anybody doesn't know or has played Call of Duty in previous years, going back to when Call of Duty specifically was a World War II style game only, before they got into like Black Ops and all the Modern Warfare stuff and whatever, they were all World War II style games.
Yes.
And I'm talking like late 2000s, 2000 teens. And you would play as the Americans, the good guys every time. and you'd fight against the Nazis or the Japanese, the bad guys, every time in the story mode and whatnot. And back then, the Nazis had the swastika and all the iconography that went with their evil, ideology and whatnot in the game. Now, if you play any of the games, they've made a couple more recent World War II versions of Call of Duty. That doesn't exist. They are the Nazis. They are the Germans. They look the uniforms all look the same. But if you ever pay attention, there are no swastikas or any of that Nazi iconography or symbology. Why? Because it is illegal in Germany to display such things. So Activision, Blizzard, Treyarch, whoever is making these games, decided it's just easier to just make one version of the game with one style and not make two that we're going to sell this other version in Germany. So this does touch the real world in ways you didn't even think it might.
I never knew until this point that if you were in Austria and you started investigating World War II and you went down a different path than what the narrative, the religion of the state allows you to look into, they will jail you. They will arrest you.
Yeah. Or like they're going to talk about here, like you couldn't just get up on a soapbox perhaps over there or in Germany. Like you can't just be a Nazi anymore in Germany. You'll be put in prison or, completely ostracized from society to a certain extent. So let's keep going here. And there's a couple more minutes.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes left.
For doing that. You might have your life ruined and lose your job.
You might absolutely go to jail in this country.
Nowadays, you might. But, you could write a book. You could take any angle on it you want. You're not going to ever get a job or have a publisher want to publish it or anything, but you could do it. You can go out on the street corner and stand on a box and say whatever it is you think. But even still, that event is really it's such a core part of the state religion that there are emotional triggers built into people since childhood that almost prevent them from taking an approach that might lead them to information or to conclusions that are not part of the state religion's version of that event. And again, you're going to find that. I'm sure the Peloponnesian Wars were like that for the ancient Greeks.
Well, that's right. Well, by the way, the American Revolution, which is now totally irrelevant to modern America, unfortunately, was like that. The life of Lincoln was like that. Lincoln was an very complicated guy. It's not an endorsement of slavery. Well, speaking for myself, I think slavery is disgusting. It's the worst thing. What you're saying is absolutely right. It's not just the Second World War that is sort of uniquely censored or protected. The mythology around it, it's every event that's central to a nation's understanding of itself, and then that changes over time. So,
here's the problem with doing something like that. And this is something
real quick. I made that cut here just because otherwise we'd be watching 10 minutes of them talking. So I made that cut to the next important part.
Very aware of as I research it and start to work on the project is that when you have a mythologized historical event that is told, again, you go to a lot of places in Europe, it's a legal requirement. Over here, it's not quite that, but it almost might as well be where that this event is going to be described from a certain perspective. You're going to approach it a certain way. There are just certain things you're not allowed to question. You have to
literally, it's a crime to ask questions.
Right.
Yes.
Then whenever that's the case, when you try to add any type of balance to that account, when you try to tell the story in a way that brings other approaches and other perspectives into it, it's going to look like you're trying to justify those other things. That's just how it's going to seem to people who are very locked into this side. And so if you start talking about the interwar period and how the Weimar culture, after the First World War led to something like the rise of the National Socialists, and why the people who embraced that movement did embrace it in a way that's not just, was because they were, you had this country, Germany, a sophisticated cultural power that was fine. And then they all turned into demons for a few years and now they're fine again. Like that's sort of the official story. And
what
I think
quote.
we all know that makes no sense. Everything has a cause.
Right. I thought that was probably one of the most interesting parts of that. It's what Darryl is trying to do here is obviously talk about the history of World War II and whatnot, but the Germans are humans, right? They were humans, they are humans, and they continue to be humans. And if you dehumanize people, then that narrative makes sense. They were fine, then they were demons, and now they're fine again. That doesn't make sense. That's not how real life works.
They repented.
I just think this was so interesting to me psychologically, because he's talking about like the state religion. And then if you think about it, you know, Tucker made the point that the American Revolution is almost doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
I'd say that the American Revolution and that sort of way, like that vibe, is more central to people like me and use a quote unquote national religion or identity, right? Like we vibe with like fuck the English, you know, independence, America, 1776.
Are you voting for a felon? The founding fathers were felons,
right? Yeah. So I'm not even saying that I'm above or beneath any of that shit, right? Like I behave in a certain way as well in terms of that. We all do, to some extent, have these foundational myths around our society. And I think they did reference, and I actually do think, like, you can't have a country without that, right? Like, there are these figures that are
there has to be secrets of some extent.
The Starks, Aegon Targaryen, right? Yeah. You know, all that shit. There has to be some of that behind it to give you all some sort of common thread historically. Now, it is interesting how people freak the fuck out, though, if you question any of that in a collegiate manner, the way Darryl has done here today. And I will show the other day, a couple days ago, I will show you guys a couple of examples of this, at least online.
I'm excited. I haven't, Doom Nation, I haven't seen this. I'm going to view this all with you right now.
Hold on one second here, folks. I got so many tabs open here that
don't bring up the Pornhub one.
Going to go first to Barry Weiss, who is a journalist, was part of the Twitter files, staunch defender of Israel at every turn, etc. The illiberal ideology that has become increasingly mainstream on the political left, one that makes war on our common history, our common identity as Americans, and fundamentally on the goodness of the American project, is inspiring a mirror ideology on the right. That is exactly where we find ourselves, with an illiberal left that defaces Churchill's statues and an illiberal right that defaces Churchill's legacy. With a left that insists 1619 was the year of the true founding of America, and a right that suggests the greatest generation was something closer to genociders. With a left that sympathizes with modern-day Nazis in the form of Hamas, and a right that sympathizes with the original ones. My latest on the war, blah, blah, blah. She wrote an article about it. So she's saying that we're, you know, in a sense, me and you, we're sympathizing with the Nazis. Darryl Cooper, sympathizing with the Nazis. Keep on. I just played what Darryl Cooper said about Churchill. And Hitler. He wasn't sympathizing with them, right? He was talking about how he thought Churchill was the villain because he led Hitler down a path that eventually ended up Hitler becoming genocidal, and and he explicitly said he's not excusing Hitler or the Nazi administration for any of that stuff. But Barry Weiss is painting a completely different story of what was said.
What it comes down to, I don't know if we said it on the podcast or if me and you were talking, where, you know, it had to be on the podcast. I really feel like it does. Probably the last episode where we had said, like, everything is World War II because it was a definitive moment in time where there was a bad guy.
Right.
And if you look forward, you know, Putin invading Ukraine, well, he's the next Hitler.
He's Hitler. Yep.
So if you question Hitler, or you bring up the fact that maybe there was other routes that could have been taken to the point Hitler wouldn't have created genocide, and he did, and he's a bad guy, and he's rotting in hell for all eternity, and that's not enough for what this man has done. But you take away that aspect of, oh, maybe there wasn't this definitive bad guy, and people cannot handle that. Thanos wasn't that bad. The Joker had some points. Killmonger was relatable. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not saying Hitler's relatable, but you know.
And I saw a lot of people used Marvel, Lord of the Rings,
really,
Game of Thrones comparisons to, like, they were mocking Darryl Cooper, saying things like that. But the thing is that life is not a fucking Marvel movie. Right. As much as we even use them as comparisons for certain things, they might be applicable. But that's not how life is. There is no such thing as black and white, and taking an honest look. So let's keep going here before I really give most of my thoughts. hang on one second here because I keep going back and forth. It is bugging.
Yeah, you had it up for a second.
Yeah. So another one here from Konstantin Kizin. This is Tucker's new audience, by the way. Hitler was right and Churchill was wrong. All right.
That's not even close.
I got one more. One more. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Okay. One more here from Seth Dillon, who is one of the guys at the Babylon Bee. Mm-hmm. And Seth Dillon says, Tucker's guessed the Holocaust was an unfortunate logistical problem. The Nazis ran out of space for prisoners. Nobody wanted to kill all the Jews, except maybe Churchill, the dastardly terrorist. Tucker, finally, an honest historian willing to tell us the truth. Now, Seth is being a little bit tongue-in-cheek there, I will admit, right? But there's a common thread, and I just picked three, right? I've seen dozens upon dozens. I've seen these guys like this quote tweeting accounts that are obviously bots, like an account with no followers that was created 5 seconds ago saying some heinous shit and then quote tweeting that and seeing like, you see, this is what Darryl Cooper is, promoting here, which is so obvious. But I noticed a trend. It's all of the super anti-woke commentators on the internet all seem to be the biggest names that are freaking out about this. This reminds me, Cap, of when we did that episode about Douglas Murray and how the West is about to fall. And I said how there's this like anti-woke to Israeli government defender pipeline. It's the same people, right? It's the same people who are freaking out in this regard as well. And I'm not trying to make this about the JOOS or anything like that. I'm just noticing a split in the right wing where there are very much so still neocons that don't want you questioning anything around World War II. Why is that? Because it is the foundational myth of this era that we are living in. And this era has provided America with an empire. And this story is the justification, like you were saying before, about every war we have been in since. It's
Saddam, Gaddafi, Putin.
It's even used in like general, like common political fighting. Like Trump is Hitler. We were Hitler for opposing the lockdowns during COVID. Right now, Putin is Hitler. Hamas is Hitler and genocidal. Everyone is Hitler at all times. The North Koreans were Hitler. The North Vietnamese were Hitler. Saddam Hussein was Hitler. Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, he was Hitler. Anytime they want to roll out a war that we don't have to be involved in, they just roll this thing out. And then that's the justification they use, or the rationalization perhaps they use as to why we have to do this.
And that's my point in saying, that's why it is so taboo and, such a problem to question this, because if you unravel that Hitler did want peace and you do unravel that Hitler didn't want to exterminate all these Jews off the bat, he did in the end. So that was his own doing. But if you unravel all that, you unravel every neocon lie in the past 70 years.
Yeah, and you can also just stop falling for it when they do it again the next time. Iran is Hitler. Iran are the Nazis. Every new war is going to be this justification. That's difficult though, because one thing I've learned is people like me, you, Zach, Garrett, James, Alan, whatever, all our podcast buddies and stuff, and a lot of the free thinkers that follow us and stuff, we can see that and not fall for it. But there is this underlying like war hawk that is in every American. And when, like we are the superpower. So, like there was all the jokes when the chief of police of London was like, oh, we'll extradite Americans. Please try me. Yeah. FOA. FAO, But real quick, that goes back to what I was saying before about ourselves and how American Revolution 1776 is more our own vibe, me and you, our type of people. Because you had that reaction the same way I did. I was like, you want to run this back again? Like,
find out, baby.
Right.
Yeah. But there is this like part of American culture that everyone has this little war hawk in them, and it's easy to get wrapped up in the next war. And also, sadly, Trump was the first president in how many, forget years, decades, that did not start a new war. New wars are part of American culture. The next war is part of our culture, wherever it may be. China and Taiwan, the shores of New Jersey, Iran, whatever. You know, the Chinese police storming us from Canada. That is part of American culture, unfortunately, because we've been immersed in war for generation upon generation upon generation.
Since this period, right? And again, it's like you're saying, it's just rolled out every time another scenario occurs. This is the rationalization as to why we have to do it. The rationalization everyone understands is, well, we were the good guys in that.
You know, I've come to this.
We're the good guys again here now.
I've come to this conclusion. I've been developing, and you've definitely helped this development, a deep, deep, deep hatred for the boomers, the boomer generation. And until the boomer generation gives up power, which is the one thing it does not want to do, there is no moving forward in this, because the boomer generation is, quote unquote, never fucking wrong. You know, that's why we're in this situation there is, because the boomers won't let us question this. The boomers don't want you to question this.
They're the ones who invented this system and this, you know, this way that things are working, this state religion, I guess you could call it, right? The other thing, man, about this is that it's not just that this is rolled out every time they have another, you know, intervention around the world that they want to sell us on, is we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. And that's why we got to go to, you know, Libya and overthrow Gaddafi. It's the second part of this is that that's the only lesson you're allowed to learn from World War II, right? That, you know, I've made the point here, like, they'll call you Neville Chamberlain, you know, who was the guy before Churchill, who was the one who was trying to negotiate with Hitler on all these, you know, different X's.
You terrible person trying to have peace.
And they,
who the fuck do you think you are?
That's like an insult. You know, they use, you know, you're just Chamberlain, you know. And that is the only lesson you're allowed to take away from the whole thing, is that, no, the only way you can deal with any scenario where another government is doing something you don't like around the world is to go to war with them. That's it. You got to do what Churchill did. Fuck them. There is no negotiation. There is no appeasement.
We don't negotiate with terrorists.
No. Just go to war with them, right? And you never even question it. And if you do question it, you have a complete nuclear melt. You've instilled in the population that you're questioning the foundational myth. How dare you? You must be rationalizing what the genocidal monster was doing. Like, it's been ingrained in us, in the sense we've been propagandized to just behave or respond that way over the years.
And just one side note, shout out Doom Nation, everybody who's listening right now. You do have the ability to comment. So if you're feeling some type of way and you want to chime in, Scagz and I would be happy to talk to you.
I don't think Doom Nation is feeling any type of way. I think they're all again, and you know, going back to the very beginning, man, like it's a very just, in a sense, boring collegiate debate.
Yeah.
You know, like, there was nothing radical or fucking revolutionary about me and Vinny Mazzi sitting across the table from each other talking about if we thought that Truman was a good guy or a bad guy.
Right.
You know, we afterwards we had beer, we sat around the fire pit and we talked about it a little bit more, and then everybody went home. And that was it. But it's portrayed to certain people as if it is literally the worst thing you could ever do. And again, why? It's because it just questions
they're protecting something.
They're protecting that ability to just launch a war on command and have everyone fall in line. It's a psyop, right? Which I use that term too much, I guess, to a certain extent. But that's what it is. How do you get popular support for any of these insane wars that are not in the American people's interest whatsoever? Well, you convince them that it's Hitler and the Nazis all over again. And if we don't do it, what's the lesson that we all learned from that, right? Don't be Chamberlain. We want to be Churchill, right? We want to go over there and stop it before it occurs. On and on and on. You know, wash, rinse, repeat. So a lesson to take from it is perhaps don't do that for future wars. Right? Think critically of them when you start hearing these buzzwords about Putler. You know, he's the next Hitler. He's rolling on to Poland next. You might want to look at it with a curious eye as to what's really going on. That's all I got to say about that.
Same here. So Our next topic is the DOJ and Tim Pool.
Hitler is now funding right-wing conservative commentators in the United States. So the Department of Justice has to go and indict them because we can't have Hitler rolling over Poland and propagandizing the American people any further. Okay, I'm being sarcastic, but I have from the Department of Justice's website here 2 RT employees indicted for covertly funding and directing U.S. company that published thousands of videos in furtherance of Russian interests. Employees of Russian state-controlled media outlet deployed nearly $10 million to publish RT-curated content, which garnered millions of views through a Tennessee-based online content creation company. An indictment charging Russian national Konstantin Kalishnikov, which is funny that that's the name that they created for this guy, the name of a rifle. Is that it?
Kalishnikov AK-47,
yeah, right, yeah. 31, also known as Kostya, and Elena Afanasyev, 27, also known as Lena, with conspiracy to violate Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, and conspiracy to commit money laundering was unsealed today in the Southern District of New York. Kalishnikov and Afanasyev.
Wait a second. So not only is the DOJ involved, Letitia James is involved in this too?
I don't know if it's Letitia James, but you caught that, right? It's the Southern District of New York courtroom. The same one, the shitty one that's always going after Trump. Man,
there's just so many truthful people involved in this. Okay.
Justice Department charged 2 employees of RT, $10 million in a scheme to create and distribute content to U.S. audiences with hidden Russian government messaging, said Attorney General Merrick Garland. The Justice Department will not tolerate attempts by an authoritarian regime to exploit our country's free exchange of ideas in order to covertly further its own propaganda efforts, and our investigation into this matter remains ongoing. The gaslighting. We read you the fucking Twitter files. Our own government was doing this to us. They were curating everything you read about COVID, Ukraine, etc. But here he is saying, we'll not tolerate such a thing happening in our country.
This is the same DOJ that told you to believe the Trump-Russia hoax, the same DOJ that said the Hunter Biden laptops were Russia disinformation. And it's just so strange that this company licensed right-wing style podcasts that have tremendous reach.
Right.
So strange. So, the real problem here is, I'm sure it's 100% possible that Russian spies are being integrated into the media to propagate us. That's not far-fetched, but also Kathy Hochul's advisor or whatever was a Chinese spy. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about, the right-wing podcasts over here. It's just hard because I got to be honest, and I know, like the CIA and the FBI and all of them are definitely listening to the Two Doom Men podcast because we're a couple of domestic terrorists over here. Your image is tarnished. Yeah. We don't buy this shit no more.
Yes, we don't, right? But
there are people who do. I know.
I get a little bit later on to this, and I'll even I'm a little bit even skeptical of some of the people involved in this as well. Although I don't, I don't necessarily just buy this story because it's coming from our insane, corrupt government to begin with. But then at the same time, this does sound like something Russia would do, right?
Oh, it's well in the means of possible, completely possible. One thing, I don't know, where are you going next with this?
I was going to read a little bit more so that everybody has the actual details from, instead of getting a third hand from some other, from CNN or something. So next part I wanted to read, which I thought was funny. Covert attempts to sow division and trick Americans into unwittingly consuming foreign propaganda represents attacks on our democracy, says FBI
what's
Director
Joe Biden doing?
Ray. All right. Let's see. I wanted to get down to the part where, okay. So between in or about October 2023 and in or about August 2024, RT sent wire transfers to U.S. Company One, totaling approximately $9.7 million, which represented nearly 90% of U.S. Company One's bank deposits from all sources combined. The wires were sent from shell companies in Turkey, the UAE, and Mauritius. and were often accompanied by wire notes describing the payments to the purchase of electronics. For example, blah, 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 they're laundering the money and hiding what it was from. U.S. Company 1 never disclosed to its viewers that it was funded and directed by RT, nor did U.S. Company 1 or its 2 founders register with the Attorney General as an agent of a foreign principal. So they're being vague. They're not naming the company directly, but that's
Right,
everybody knows who it is.
Yeah.
It's Tenet Media. And one of the 2 people they're talking about here is Lauren Chen, who I referenced before, like a conservative commentator who I've followed for a couple of years, and I agree with some of her takes. Some of her takes I don't agree with. Right? Thought she was pretty decent though, and I think her husband is the other person. All right, so let's get on to anyway. It's not here, or I might have skipped over it, but anyway, it does reference, or it has been referenced elsewhere that. Couple of the other shows and people who had shows on this Tenet Media are Tim Pool. He had his Culture War podcast. Just one of Tim Pool's podcasts was on this Tenet Media, like licensed to it. Benny Johnson, who's another big-time conservative commentator. One of his shows were on there. And Dave Rubin, who I can't even get anything because he blocked me on Twitter from him. He's on there as well. And now, in a sense, everyone's making it out like if you're seeing like Destiny is out there like, you see, I told you Tim Pool is a Russian agent, etc., etc.
This is what prevailing pisses me off the most. Doom Nation, if you see people talking in this manner, please correct them in whatever way you feel necessary. I won't tell you how because YouTube's listening. But these podcasters are most likely victims. This shell company was sending money to a company that licensed their program. What happens with a licensed program? Let's just say somebody from Fox News really likes the Two Do Men podcast. They want to air it on Fox News. Cool. We have a contract. There's some money exchanged, and we give them the rights to the Two Do Men podcast to air on Fox News. And what they do from there is on them. We sit here. We record our own episodes. Scagz edits them. There's no influence by Fox. Whatever happens once they air it is on them.
In a perfect world.
Yes, in a perfect world.
I will be the first to admit, Cap, that is not what happens throughout almost all of media. In the United States. All of corporate media is a backroom deal, a wink and a nod. Yes, we're going to license your show, but you better, talk about this. You better talk about that. Or if not, we'll Tucker Carlson your ass and fire you if you start talking about things off the script. So what you're describing is how it should work. Right. In a sense, like I will use the example of way back when we were doing shows on WBOB in Rhode Island. Yeah. Right. That was Pal from the radio station there. Just like found us. You're like, hey, you guys are funny. Like, you guys are good. You want to come and do shows and be on our network? We didn't pay us. We didn't exchange any money or anything like that. But it was innocent. It was honest. He gave us a slot on his radio show, and we did a show over there in Rhode Island on their network. That's what it should be. That's most of the time not what it is. That's also what the insinuation here is as well regarding Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, and Dave Rubin. That look, Russia was paying the company that was licensing their shows, so that's why they've been so against the war in Ukraine. That's why they've been Putin talking points on their show so often. And with that comes, a character assassination on their shows themselves. And they have big shows that reach a lot of people and influence a lot of people. How many people listen to Tim Pool? Over 500,000 an episode, right? Yep. Every day. More than CNN.
And that's what circles me back to we're in the middle of an election year. We've already had an assassination attempt. We've literally watched the VP coup the president, right? This is the first time in unprecedented history that we have a candidate that is the candidate without a single vote being casted in her favor. She was just, talk about a threat to democracy, just installed in this position. The world forgot about Biden faster than they forgot about the fires in Maui, and, the Department of Justice, which we just talked about, we're not buying your shit no more, is saying Russia is, influencing a podcast like Tim Pool. That it's an election year. You don't want Tim Pool talking about this stuff. Gee, look, what can we cook up to get him off the air? defame him, deplatform him.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
your narrative of it makes sense, Cap. I will go to one. I took Benny Johnson's statement on this. He says, a year ago, a media startup pitched my company to provide content as an independent contractor. Our lawyers negotiated a standard arm's length deal, which was later terminated. We are disturbed by the allegation in today's indictment, which made clear that myself and other influencers were victims in this alleged scheme. My lawyers will handle anyone who states or suggests otherwise. Tim Pool made a similar statement as well. I can't see Dave Rubens, like I said, because he blocked me. So that's what they're going with. They're going with that they didn't know anything about it. But the narrative, along, in the press here, here's the narrative from the paid propagandist Harry Sisson, a company with a huge MAGA Republican. A company with a number of huge MAGA Republican creators allegedly got $10 million from the Russian government to spread Russian propaganda. This is your sign to stop listening to Republicans on social media. That's Harry Sisson. I have a clip too from the corporate press themselves. If you want to watch that, Cap,
let's go for it.
It's one of those Tom Elliott clips that are fantastic. He does a great job.
Too bad nobody wants to talk about the $10 million that Russia sent Hunter Biden.
Yeah, or Ukraine. I mean, yeah.
Right.
Okay. So this is
the governor of Moscow.
Yeah, the mayor.
Yeah. Mayor.
So this is MSNBC, and they're talking about this whole thing.
Carlson, let me first ask you for your reaction to what was charged yesterday by DOJ.
Well, look, it is the continuation of what we saw in 2016 and what Russia tried to do in 2020.
See?
And now it's confirmation that Russia is trying to, once again, meddle in our election, our presidential election, and that it's clear.
Hold on. So he's saying that this is clear that Russia's trying to meddle in the election. So even on its face, that's wrong. Even if you want to give them that this is correct and Tim Pool is a Russian agent, well, technically, Russia's just interfering in our public discourse and our own shows and propaganda here. They're not directly interfering with the election themselves. It's not like their $10 million is going towards overriding voting machines or something like that.
Like the $400 million that Zuckerberg gave.
So even by his own logic, he's wrong there.
It's trying to do so to support Donald Trump. Who should also be included in the category of, at minimum, a useful idiot for Vladimir Putin. But what is, I think, a little bit more disquieting to me, at least, as someone who sits on this so-called weaponization of the federal government subcommittee in Congress under Jim Jordan's chairmanship, is that they have spent this entire Congress attacking the government for trying to stop malign influencers like Russia and using euphemisms like censorship and efforts to interfere in the First Amendment, also that they could pave the way for Russia to do exactly what it has now been charged with doing and sanctioned for doing. And so I'm not making any allegations that they knew about any of this, but I certainly have been banging the drum that the point of
these guys, they're so bad. They're so bad at what they even
I don't even know who this guy is, but I want to knock all his teeth out in one shot.
Another NPC. I just made 100 accusations, but I'm not making any accusations.
Yeah.
This subcommittee.
Sorry, let me. It's only 10 seconds left or 15 seconds left.
Was to chill the government from having any interactions with social media companies in order to stop election interference. And now we see exactly what we're talking about when we talk about election interference.
So, yeah, the corporate press is just trotting out Russiagate all over again, in a sense.
My final statement on this, I'm right. I'm 110% right. My theory that I just expressed here moments ago is the exact game plan that they cooked up. Before you know it, you better go throw out that little Russian hat you have on that wall over there, because before you know it, CNN, two doomed men, Russia collusion.
Look, they're going to get Q style, right? The blue and stuff. You see in the background, there's a Soviet Union hat. It's a symbol that they're really Russian agents behind the scene of the whole thing. You know, that's a level of stupid that these fucking assholes would get. Now, the funniest thing about this entire thing, now that's I showed you the narrative from the paid propagandists like Harry Sisson. Now showed everybody the narrative, which is on the corporate press. The funniest thing about this whole thing is that Lauren Chen has been super critical of Donald Trump at every turn. She's been like, you've seen him, Cap, like us, the libertarians. We have our gripes with Donald Trump. We're not afraid to boo him at the convention or express ourselves. Lauren Chen's not necessarily a libertarian; she's conservative, but she's been very critical of Donald Trump and withholding her vote in the election because of some of the pro-life stuff, some of the other issues around Israel and things like that, like things I tend to agree with. Right, so that doesn't even line up with the person who Russia was paying to spread Russian propaganda. Like, it doesn't line up at all. She's been, in a sense, subverting some like Trump's election chances from her conservative worldview.
Well, the only real main problem with what you just said is that, like, us and Chen were being logical. MSNBC has one goal and one goal only: get Trump.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this genuinely has nothing to do with Trump, but they still mentioned him in it.
Yeah, they do. And I'm not even going to go. I'm not even going to give Lauren Chen the benefit of doubt. I don't know. Maybe she does know everything about this whatsoever, and that's what she was doing. But what I'm trying to tell you is that, like, that doesn't line up with what the propaganda about this is saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's not what Lauren Chen has been doing, just boosting Trump. That makes more sense for, like, Tim Pool. Tim Pool is he's in the bag for Trump.
Yeah, in the past several years,
right. But then again, he's not the guy who owns the company that was being paid from Russia. He just had a show being licensed, and the show is not Timcast; it's the Culture War show. Which
That's
is not
the funny
show.
part of all this. Is it's so yes, Tim Pool is famous for IRL, where they talk politics every week, and he is a clear now. When I first started listening to Tim Pool, he wasn't a full-time supporter of Trump. Now he is. But they license the Culture War, and they talk about, like, movies and video games, and it's not even it's his one, like, non-political show.
Yeah,
but
they're making political sometimes. There's political topics, but it's not solely political. Right. They talk about horror movies and shit there sometimes as well. So it's in my opinion, man. Again, I don't know. Like, I don't know anything behind the scenes about any of this whatsoever. I don't believe our government, of course. I don't believe the Russian government whatsoever. I'll be honest, I don't even fucking believe Tim Pool and these guys either. Right? I have a tweet of the week here later that points on that as well, which I'll get to. But maybe before we wrap this up, Tom Elliott was one who made that video, posted that video. He had a great other tweet here as well. Across the corporate media, everyone's claiming Russia's funding conservative influences to help Trump in 2024. Their chief culprit is the founder of Tenet, Lauren Chen, who received money from RT, LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. But if that were true, why does almost everything she write about Trump focus on how conservatives should refrain from voting for Trump unless and until he embraces conservative principles? No matter what, the talking point that Russia is meddling in the election on behalf of Trump is now firmly implanted. Democrats and their media colleagues will now repeat it until the airwaves are saturated and this disinformation is accepted as conventional wisdom. 100 fucking.
I'm telling you, this is the game plan. That's the game plan. That's why they did this.
Dude,
that's why the media's been quiet, and that's why they started covering this.
And it furthers the war in Ukraine, right? Like, look, this guy, he's, that's why we have to stay over there and keep, funding this thing and fighting him, right?
Only Hitler would fund pro-Trump podcasts.
Exactly, right? Because why? Because Trump is Hitler too, right? And so is Tim Pool and all these other guys who are, Trump boosters. All right, so that's it. Any other thoughts on that, Cat? Maybe we wrap it up with tweets of the week.
I'm right.
In a moment. There's a little bit more context here, folks, in tweets of the week that will apply as well. But
not mine. Mine are funny.
Of the week is going to be mine, and I screenshotted it. I screenshotted it on purpose because I knew it was going to get deleted. I fucking knew it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's from the AP and the Associated Press, and it says J.D. Vance says school shootings are a fact of life. Calls for better security. Now,
he didn't say that though, right?
Harsh, right? They're a fact of life. You just gotta just accept school shootings. They're insinuating that is what J.D. Vance said. But as I'm sure many listeners of Doom Nation might figure out, no, that's not what J.D. Vance said. This is what J.D. Vance said.
I don't like this. I don't like to admit this. I don't like that this is a fact of life. But if you are a psycho,
I don't like that this is a fact of life. He didn't say this is a fact of life and basically dismissing it, get on with it. Kids get shot at schools. He says, I don't like that this is a fact of life. But they spun it as if he said it's just a fact of life, so just get along with it. They deleted that because that was so fucking fake.
Yeah.
It's such a lie that they couldn't even let that one ride.
On top of the fact he's calling for the right thing, which is more security.
Yeah.
And where was I going with this? Oh well, I had a thought and I lost it already.
Oh, good. All right.
If it comes back, I will chime in.
Going to go over to yours. Good.
Elon Musk, don't let Trump cheat. Scroll down a little bit. Demand voter ID and paper ballots. This is obviously, a joke, but I really believe the left is stupid enough to, like, if we start spinning this as like Donald Trump's going to cheat, we need paper ballots. Like
Reverse
you would
psychology.
see all the NPCs like paper ballots.
Yeah. Reverse psychology. I like it. Definitely. All right. I'm going to my second. I got.
I remember what I was going to say now about the school shooting and the facts of life.
Go ahead.
Yeah. One, we need more security. Two, a good guy with a gun beat the bad guy with the gun. Real shocker. So that's why it's already out of the news. But most importantly, this kid was on an FBI watch list.
Yeah.
How about we've now had like 2 dozen mass shootings where the guy was on a watch list.
Everyone.
How about everybody who's on a watch list right now? The FBI. You went to everybody who was in Washington on January 6th. How about now you take the list of your watch group and you knock on all their fucking doors? Can you do that for me, the FBI? Or are you just too busy planting evidence in Mar-a-Lago?
They're busy going after grandmas who tweet things they don't like.
If you're on a watch list, knock on the fucking door. It's that simple.
All right. So I'm going to give Cenk some credit here. I actually thought
once in a blue moon can hit it out of the park.
Cenk,
as much as I despise him,
makes a good point here, in my opinion. He says the idea that Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, etc., didn't even Google a guy who was giving them $400,000 a month is ridiculous. Those videos were worth about $50 to $100, and they got paid $100,000 per video. $5 million a year, and you didn't even do a search of who's giving it to you? Come on. I think that's a pretty good point. I'm going to be honest with you, right?
It's
going back to
much as I don't like him, it's fair.
It's a good point, right? Again, this is why I'm trying to be level-headed about this whole thing. Going back to when, Pal from WBOB reached out to us. Mm-hmm. The first thing I did was Google, what the fuck is WBOB? I ain't never heard of that before, right? And, I did my diligence. Then I approached you and told them, talk to this guy, etc. So I did do the bare minimum research at least. I think that's a good point. If someone is about, and that was for nothing. That was for fun, in a sense, right? We were just doing it because we like doing this shit, right? But, that is a good point. You're about to sign a major deal, and you don't look into anything, behind it, it's a bit suspicious. Now, that doesn't mean that that's not even true. It might just be like, whatever.
I mean, but how would you do the research to find 2 people out of the entire organization could potentially be Russian assets?
Yeah, that's a good point, too. I'm just saying that was a good point from Cenk. I'll hand him that one. All right, let's go over to your second tweet. Here we go.
Now, I know this is from a World War II movie. I just don't know what movie.
This is from the pianist. Come on, you don't know that?
No, I never seen it. I honestly.
Great movie.
Wall Street Silver. Don't shoot. I'm retarded. Prove it. Unrealized capital gains tax is good for the economy.
Yeah. This is more evidence of what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. I love The Pianist. I thought that was a great movie.
I never seen it, unfortunately.
You should watch it, right?
Yeah.
It's great. It's about a Jewish pianist. I forget exactly where he's from. I think Poland or something like that. And he gets caught up in the war. He's hiding out. The Nazis are looking for him. Gets caught. The Soviets come. These are the Soviets. They come and they think he's a Nazi because he's wearing a Nazi coat because he's just trying to keep himself warm. Great movie, right? But how many movies are there like that? Right now, this is actually, I'm not sure how exact, like true to history this is about this guy. This was a real person. This movie is based on, the pianist over there. But again, like all of these things are just little more puzzle pieces behind the fact that this is our foundational myth for this era that we live in and everything that we said as well. I'm not saying it's not a good movie. It was one of my favorites of all time, but I again, I don't even like the fact that I now like kind of like all this stuff around World
You
War.
look behind the curtain.
Yeah. Sometimes it's, what is it? Just put me back in. I don't want to know nothing. I don't want to know, like you said.
Take, what was it? The blue pill, and just go back and wake up. And
I don't want to know. No, I don't want to remember anything.
Yeah.
Like you said. All right. So my next tweet, he did so good on the last one that I gave him a second one.
Another
Chank again. And he says, agree with an online right-winger, 2%. Their reaction, welcome to the party. MAGA welcomes you. Agree with an online leftist, only 98%. Their reaction, Nazi!
This is not wrong at all. This is not wrong at all. MAGA is the party of tolerance. The left wing is the most segregated party there is. If you do not fall in line 100%, you are a white supremacist, Trump-loving, Putin-sympathizing piece of shit. Excuse me.
So this one hits on many different levels. It hits on the fact that that's all true to a certain extent. If you, like Bobby Kennedy Jr. as an example, now MAGA loves him. And this goes back to the same thing we've been talking about this entire episode. Everything is Hitler. Everything is the Nazis. Anything that, like the establishment, leftist, whatever the fuck you want to call it, the blob, as Mike Benz would call it, doesn't like, right? Nazi.
Yeah.
There's so many examples of this everywhere. And again, once you've seen behind the curtain, you can not only can you not unsee it, but holy shit, you start seeing it fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Like you see where it is everywhere.
Yeah.
Go ahead, what were you gonna say?
It's just the terminology, and we have to start taking it as words. The left loves saying you're a white supremacist, you're a racist, you're a Nazi, you're a bigot. And it's just, one of those terms. Yeah, I'm a racist. Okay. You know what I mean? Like it's going to get to the point. Yeah. Where it's meaningless. They take all the meaning out of the word because, everything's racist. So okay, cool. Then I'm racist, whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we'll have some fun here at the end. Sorry to those who are listening later on. You're not going to be able to understand this one. But from non-aesthetic
Murphy.
Nah, this one was a violation. Let's play this video. This had me rolling.
Oh no.
Oh, man.
Dude, this would be a fist fight.
Yeah.
This would be a fist fight.
So those who are listening, it's people who are getting like those funny
caricatures,
paintings.
Yeah.
And the woman, she got some big ass teeth, and boy, the artist really took it above and beyond, representing her big ass teeth. So man, when I saw that earlier this week, I almost fell out of my chair.
That is hilarious.
Let's end it on a lighter note here this weekend. Yeah.
All right. Any final words?
Don't forget Tuesday. Around 8:50 p.m. Eastern time. The debate starts at 9 p.m. Eastern time. We will be playing the entire debate live. We will be in the background commenting on it. So don't watch it on the corporate news. They suck. Come watch it on the Two Doom Men podcast channel on all the places that you might find it. Linktree.com/2doommen.
Jesus, Wednesday is going to be an exhausting day for me.
Oh, yeah.
And on that note, Doom Nation, thank you guys for listening. It's been another rendition of the Two Doom Men podcast. As always, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Don't let these lefty loons tell you otherwise. Adios, Doom Nation.